The world's largest outdoor cocktail party takes place this weekend in Jacksonville. The Florida Gators will look to pull the upset against their arch rival, Georgia. Helping us break it all down, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking all things Florida, Nick De La Torre joins the show once again. Nick, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you recognizing the one true name of this game. The mayor of Jacksonville and the people in City Hall in Jacksonville don't like the name, but by God, it's nothing other than the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Nick, it's the only name I call it by. I grew up with it. I think it was 2006. They kind of disbanded or tried to get rid, but it's the cocktail party. It is.
I mean, it's like Elon trying to get me to call Twitter X. It's just not going to happen. Right? It's just not going to happen.
That's a really good way to put it. Nick, before we dive in this game, though, obviously I want to get your thoughts on the rivalry, the game itself. The last time, funny enough, you and I spoke, I think was the week of the Miami game. So a lot has happened since then. Obviously, rough start to the season, losing to Miami, losing to A&M. But I want to go back the last few weeks because it does feel like Florida almost quietly is playing better football. I mean, you score 48 points in the win over Kentucky last weekend. You probably should have beaten Tennessee, which is the frustrating part in that game in Neyland and Knoxville. You got the win over UCF, which you and I talked about was a losable game for Florida. I think UCF was actually favored going into that game. And then it goes all the way back. Obviously, you get off the schneid and you beat Mississippi State for your first conference win. Again, a lot has changed. No more Graham Mertz, unfortunately, goes down with the injury in that Tennessee game. But DJ Lagway takes over and the offense explodes against what we think is a pretty decent Kentucky team. So we sit here now 4-3 overall, 2-2 in conference play. This is the start of the most brutal stretch of the season. We all knew that. Your overall just feelings and thoughts on this Florida football team right now with DJ Lagway leading the charge and just thoughts on this team as a whole right now versus maybe you had earlier in the season or certainly going into the season.
Yeah, it's like the Rose from Titanic meme. It's been 84 years since that Florida-Miami game. It's interesting because Florida, there was, and I remember telling Billy Napier both on and off the record, or asking him, do you understand how important this Miami game is? There is a segment of fans that including fans that write checks with 2 commas yearly, who will just not ever come back to your side. Outside of you going 11-1 and running the table, they will not come back to your side if you lose to Miami. And it wasn't just losing to Miami. Maybe if you lost 44-41, 28-27, it was the fact that at no point did you look like you were competing in that ball game to a coach who was hired 8 days after the coach that you have. You've had the exact same time to build programs. One looked like a playoff contender. One looked like they would be fighting for bowl eligibility, which Florida will be now. You don't win any kind of good graces other than, man, DJ Lagway looked really good against Samford. And then the next team you play, by the way, Mike Elko was hired the same year as Billy Napier at Duke, not who he was coaching when he came into Gainesville. And the score at the end of the game is a lot closer than the actual game was. So after 3 weeks, fans were done. Fans were done with Billy Napier. And then you get Mississippi State. They stink. They might not win another SEC game this year. Fans don't really feel good about that. Then you go into the bye week, and really the difference that Florida has the biggest difference Florida has shown after the bye is the defense. Florida was near the bottom in the national rankings in third down defense. But you have to kind of look at it deeper than that. UCF not only doesn't want to pass, they don't care that they don't want to pass. So you're able to just sell out against the run and say, hey, if KJ Jefferson beats us with his arm, we won't be happy, but we'll live with that. And you beat UCF with this new defense that is kind of pinning its ears back and not going to let you run the football. They brought that exact same defense to Tennessee, which surprised me. And I do agree that Florida played better than Tennessee, but Nico missed 3, 4, 5 guys who had gotten back behind defensive backs. And if you connect on those passes, maybe we're talking about another blowout. And then last week against Kentucky, Brock Vandegrift is just not someone that Kirby Smart's losing sleep over him being in the transfer portal. So it's three kind of – the defense has been really good, but they've kind of just been able to play one style. Nico didn't beat them with their arm. They challenged him to, and he just couldn't. And then the other two quarterbacks aren't capable of doing that. It's a different story this week with Georgia. It's a Georgia team that's not even running the ball as much as we're used to seeing them run. They're really kind of just letting Carson Beck fling it. They've got a good offensive line in terms of pass protection. I think he's been sacked 7 times through 7 games. So it's interesting to me. What does Florida bring in defensively? You got another bye week to kind of work on things and really focus in on Georgia. But if you're going to come in with that same defensive strategy 4 weeks in a row, like, you've got to really batten up the hatches in the secondary. And it might be a week where Jason Marshall, who's been having his best season since he's been in Gainesville, might not be available because of the injury he sustained. And Jakeem Jackson's been out since week 2. You're talking about now 2 of the 3 guys you had starting for you out. And it'll be a young secondary, potentially Cormani McClain getting a ton of reps. He had a great game in his limited snaps against Kentucky, but it's a tough task for Florida. They have gotten better. I think DJ Lagway, not to be so long-winded, but I think what DJ Lagway does is his running ability, and he's not a run-first quarterback either. He's even when the pocket's breaking down, you're watching him keep his eyes upfield. His arm talent's incredible to watch, whether it's on camera or on TV or in person. The off-balance, off-platform throws he makes, really spinning it still. Jumping up in the air like Derek Jeter at shortstop and still throwing a strike 30 yards downfield. His running ability makes you play 11 hats on 11 hats, and that opens up things in the running game. And if you start running the ball effectively, now you get secondary safeties, linebackers, cornerbacks peeking their eyes into the backfield, and DJ has this unique accuracy on that deep ball. And it kind of all starts building on top of each other. So, yeah, I think Florida's offense is more dynamic. Now, DJ is 19 years old going against a Georgia defense who has Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann. And I'm guessing Will Muschamp probably zoomed in a couple of times. I know he's only in an analyst role now, but with his history with the University of Florida, I can imagine Will wants to be involved in trying to get his Georgia Bulldogs a win this week. So there's a lot of storylines. DJ's super exciting, but he's 19. You're going to take your lumps, and one of the lumps might be this week. I think it will be a better performance than Anthony Richardson 3 years ago when he had to make his first career start against that Georgia defense, which put approximately 112 guys into the NFL.
Nick, I'm sure it's a question you've been asked. I don't even know how many times on a weekly basis. So forgive me for, attacking the low-hanging fruit, but where do we sit right now with Billy Napier, and what would you put the likelihood at? Obviously, a lot depends on these last 5 games. You better beat Florida State, and you need to find a way, I think, probably to steal another one, make a bowl game. But, I mean, realistically, right now, where do we sit with Billy Napier?
Yeah, there's a lot of fans that are done. The fans don't hire and fire, though. This isn't Greg Schiano getting almost hired at Tennessee, and the fans firing him before they could even hire him. I think I've pretty consistently said all year since the start of the season, I think if given this schedule, if he wins 6 games or 7 games, that he'll get his job. I don't think Scott Strickland wants to fire Billy Napier. I think he went out on a limb, gave Billy Napier essentially a blank check to run the program the way he wants to run it, and told him you would have time to run it and build the program. And we're only in year 3. I think if you get to 6 wins, Florida State looks like it should be a win. That's already 5, which means you're upsetting Georgia, Texas, LSU, or Ole Miss. And to beat Lane Kiffin in the second to last week to save your job might be poetic or ironic. I'm not sure which one. But I think if Billy Napier gets to 6 or 7 wins, and it looks realistic that they can get to 6 with, one upset and beating Florida State, it'll be probably the only game they're favored. Florida State, probably the only game they're favored in the rest of the way. But I think he will get another year. And a lot of that is you're getting to see DJ Lagway now. And DJ Lagway came to the University of Florida not because he grew up watching Danny Warfel and Tim Tebow and knew about Steve Spurrier. He came here because of his relationship with Billy Napier, Ryan O'Hara, and there's a lot of that with quarterbacks. I'm going to get developed, and he thinks that Billy Napier can develop him. You don't keep a coach that you want to fire because of one player, but I don't think Florida wants to fire Billy Napier. Now, all that goes out the door if you lose by 45 this week and 45 next week, and then LSU comes in and stomps on you at home as well. But I think if Billy can get to 6 wins, I think his job would be safe.
And Nick, on that note, moving into the cocktail party again, this rivalry is so fascinating. I've had Texas and Oklahoma fans, ironically enough, ask me about, how much does this game really mean to like SEC fans? And is this one, for me, this is one I grew up watching. Like it was Iron Bowl. It was third Saturday in October. It was Deep South's oldest rivalry. And then world's largest outdoor cocktail party was just one of those games. It was like one of the signature games in the SEC you look forward to. How important, Nick, is this game for Billy Napier and the Florida Gators program? I know that might sound like a silly question, but it's always important to beat your rivals. We all understand where the Georgia program is, where the Florida program is. And it's interesting, Nick, I look back over the history. I mean, you talk about a streaky rivalry. I mean, Steve Spurrier never lost to him. I think he, from 1990.
He was 11-1.
Right. From 1990 to 2010, I think Florida was like 17-3 against Georgia. And then last 15, I think Georgia's like 12-3. So it's been wildly streaky, which I think makes people, Nick, not understand like the hatred in this rivalry it matches any. But for Billy specifically for this Florida program, like how important is this game? Even if you don't win this one, like you mentioned, like keeping it close, say covering a 16.5 point spread and making this thing super competitive, let's say late into the game.
Yeah, from 1990 to 2010, Florida has an 18-3 record against Georgia. Yeah. It's interesting because when I was growing up, when Spurrier got here in 90, it was really Florida and Tennessee. They would play that first week in September, and that dictated who was in the driver's seat in the SEC. But there is no love lost with Florida and Georgia. It doesn't matter what sport they're playing in. They could have intercollegiate thumb wrestling, and you would have people tailgating and barking at each other and chomping at each other before the thumb wrestling match. It's a really unique atmosphere. We're sitting here Wednesday. People have been in the RV lot since Tuesday drinking. It's a whole week affair, and it's a really, really cool split of the stadium. Now, if you're covering it, it's not great because the stadium, the press box at Everbank is closed, so it doesn't really get loud enough because of the way the stadium is split. But inevitably, unless the game is very close, watching one half of a stadium completely empty out. Last 2 years, Georgia has a combined 54-10 halftime lead over Florida. So it's been the orange and blue side clearing out a little bit early, but I've covered games where the Treon Harris-led Gators beat Georgia, and I've watched the red and black peter out early. So it's a really, really cool environment. It means a ton to the city of Jacksonville. It was just announced that they'll be moving it away for 2 years. I think it's a missed opportunity. They moved it away for 2 years when Spurrier was there. I believe that was 94.
That was when he dropped. That was when he dropped 52 in Athens and wanted to make it a point to set the scoring record.
Florida won at home in 94, 52-14, and then Spurrier was still trying to score. They won 52-17 in 1995, and that's when he, in only a way Spurrier can say, hung half 100 between the hedges. I think it's a missed opportunity, but like we're in an age where money talks, and the cities of Tampa and Atlanta will certainly be paying a nice purse to both schools to be there. I just wonder if Georgia fans are getting Atlanta fatigue. I mean, they're there every other year to play Georgia Tech. They're there a lot recently since Kirby's been there for the SEC championship game. I think they've done like the Peach Bowl opener.
And now, Nick, they're moving Georgia Tech to Atlanta. I think at minimum when they play in Atlanta, it's going to be at Mercedes-Benz. So to your point, it's
like I said, money talks. And Georgia Tech knows that they're not going to be including that in their season ticket package either. So Good move for the fans there, but it means a ton. It's a really cool atmosphere. It earned its name. If you're there tailgating, I'll hook you up with my buddies out in Lot J. I think drinking before is frowned upon when you're going up into the press box, but you're doing a whole different kind of media.
A whole different experience. You're
right. Much better experience, to be honest with you. It's a really, really unique and cool environment. I'm sure if you've been to Texas OU, it's kind of similar there. You know, they don't have a state fair, but they have a lot of blood alcohol contents above 0.02.
Nick, as you look at this game, talk Georgia to me. What have you seen from the Dogs, areas of concern for Florida in this matchup? And are there areas that you feel like Florida can actually exploit and take advantage of and potentially lead them to pulling the upset?
Yeah, well, when I look, Florida's got to play a really, really good game. They have to play, I think, near perfect. You have to win the turnover battle. Coach Matt needs to be in Jacksonville. You can't have 12 guys on special teams. I look at Carson Beck, and he's having a good year, but he has turned the ball over 11 times, or I think 10 times, 7 or 8 interceptions, 3 fumbles. You're going to have to create turnovers there. I think if Florida is going to try to make Georgia one-dimensional, that's kind of how Georgia's been playing. They're fine throwing the ball. So I think you're going to have to create turnovers if you even are able to make them one-dimensional. And you have to start fast. I mentioned that 54-10 at halftime combined over the last 2 years. If you're Florida, you're going to go into this game believing you can beat Georgia. We've got a great game plan. We've spent 2 weeks doing it. If you're walking into the locker room at halftime and you're down 20, you don't have that belief anymore. Now you're wondering, how quickly can these next 30 minutes go so I can get on the bus and get back home? You have to keep it close, which means starting fast. And then offensively, I think Florida has to be multiple. Like I mentioned, DJ Lagway, his mobility makes you defensively play 11 on 11. You're going to have to run the ball, though, to open up those shots. If Florida gets down and in a situation where they have to throw the ball to win the game, well, now you've got 2 of the best defensive minds in college football playing chess against a 19-year-old quarterback who is going to be pressing to try to get his team back into the game. So I think Florida has to start strong. They have to be able to run the football in maybe even if you can't run it traditionally, conventionally, get the jet sweeps, get some screens, get some other things in. Florida has to be multiple. They can't allow Georgia to make them one-dimensional.
Nick, certainly this game is bigger than 1 or 2 players, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the Trevor Etienne, Jaden Rashada factor of this game. Again, this game is so much bigger than 1 player, but I mean, I got to think, no pun intended, Florida is chomping at the bit to get after Trevor Etienne. And again, does Jaden Rashada play? I highly doubt it unless Kirby Smart's trying to pull a troll job. But again, a rivalry that doesn't need any extra juice or bad blood added, it certainly feels like there's that extra bit this week.
Yeah, listen, you don't need this fire comes with its own kerosene. You don't need to bring your own. It's provided in Jacksonville. It's interesting because, we asked Billy Napier about it, and he says, Florida's going to play 10 guys this year who were on Billy Napier's roster at some point in the last 2 years. But it's different when you play Scooby Williams and Jaden Hill at Texas A&M. There's a couple guys at a couple offensive linemen that were at Tennessee. That still feels a little bit different. For Trevor Etienne to go to Georgia, I remember when I heard about it a couple weeks before, I think it was even before it was announced that he was leaving, we kind of here locally already knew he was going to be going to Georgia. And my first thought was like, unforgivable to the fan base. Like, don't come back to Florida in 15 years to watch a game on the sideline. They will not remember you fondly. And it's interesting because I wonder, we see it in pro sports too. It's such a small, close-knit circle. These guys grow up together. They're playing AAU basketball, tackle football, or going to 7-on-7 tournaments. And you see it, there's no more Detroit Pistons, Chicago Bulls, Eastern Conference Finals where you're throwing punches and throwing elbows and there's actual bad blood. We talked to one player on Monday and it was, yeah, can't wait to see him. That's my brother. Dap him up before the game, dap him up after the game, but like on the field, like we want to beat him. And I'm like, he left you guys and then got on a podcast that other Georgia players run and said, why would I be the number 2 running back there when I can come and be number 1 here and have a chance to win a national championship? I'm like, not only is he saying I should have been number 1 to begin with, but also those losers over there don't have a chance to do anything. I'm going to go try to win something this year. To me, I don't get it, but like, listen, I'm not a 19 to 23-year-old who is playing college sports, but certainly the Florida fans have no love lost for Trevor Etienne. I saw a lot. I follow some fans on Twitter. I saw his mugshot a lot after it happened, and it's popping back up again this week.
Nick, finally, key or keys to the game for Florida if they're going to pull this upset against the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, I'm going to go cliche. You've got to win the turnover battle. Florida, I see a bunch of ways Georgia can win this game. I think they can win it close. I think they can kind of just drag Florida into the deep end of the pool and suffocate them slowly, win, a close, ugly game. I think Georgia could blow Florida out of the water. I think the only way Florida wins is playing nearly perfect, not turning the ball over, no stupid penalties, procedural things. You can't give, to use a baseball terminology, you can't drop a foul ball with 2 outs and give a guy another strike, another chance, another out. Florida's going to have to win the turnover battle, and I think the way they win is winning it close. I don't know if Florida gets in, to a boat race. I think that might be – you don't want to race anyone in Athens recently. They seem to be winning those races except for the PD. They must have better cars. But I think Florida has to kind of make it close and make it muddy and kind of win an ugly game.
Yeah, I was wondering, Nick, how long it was going to take you to I was actually proud of you for not pulling out the Trevor Etienne racing card or whatever it was, the DUI thing he got in trouble. But good on you. That was very crafty of you to squeeze that in. Good stuff. Yeah. Again, no love lost in the rivalry, no doubt.
I was just trying to talk 45 miles an hour until.
Indeed. Nick De La Torre, one of the best in the business. Again, talking Florida Gators. Nick, appreciate you taking the time, man. Let's definitely do it again soon and hope to link up with you in Jacksonville.
Appreciate you.